She's not good enough for you. And deep down, you know it. That's what she said. Not in a whisper, not in private. She said it out loud, in the middle of their living room, while her son sat right there on the couch. And he didn't say a word. Not one word. He just looked down at his hands like he hadn't heard a thing. My name is Emma. I'm 28 years old, and I have been married to David for 3 years. We met in college, fell in love fast, and got married young. I knew from the beginning that his mother, Patricia, was the kind of woman who had opinions about everything and kept none of them to herself. But I told myself that was fine. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself that if I was patient enough, respectful enough, kind enough, she would eventually come around. I was wrong about that. I was very wrong. From the first time David brought me home to meet her, Patricia made it clear that she had a picture in her mind of who her son was supposed to marry. And I was not that picture. She never said it directly at first. She didn't have to. It was in the way she looked at me when I walked through the door. It was in the way she asked me questions that weren't really questions. They were little tests, small traps dressed up as conversation. So where did you say your family is from? And what does your mother do again? David always had such high standards, didn't he? She smiled the whole time. That was the part that got to me the most. She always smiled. I smiled back. I answered her questions. I helped her in the kitchen even when she didn't ask me to. I brought her flowers on holidays. I remembered her birthday. I did everything I was supposed to do, everything a good daughter-in-law is supposed to do, and it never made a single difference. Because the problem was never really about what I did. The problem was about what I looked like, where I came from, and the simple fact that I was not the woman she had chosen for her son. David never saw it that way. Or maybe he saw it and chose not to deal with it. I'm still not sure which one is worse. Every time I tried to talk to him about something his mother said or did, he had an explanation ready. That's just how she talks. She doesn't mean it like that. You're being too sensitive. I heard those 3 sentences so many times in our marriage that I stopped counting. I started keeping things to myself instead. I smiled at family dinners. I was polite on the phone. I kept the peace because I loved my husband and I believed that love meant sacrifice sometimes. But there is a limit to how much a person can sacrifice before they start losing pieces of themselves. The thing about Patricia is that she was smart about it. She never crossed a line so obvious that David couldn't look away. She always kept it just subtle enough that she had room to say she was joking, or that I had misunderstood, or that I was being dramatic. She had been doing this her whole life. She knew exactly how far she could go. She knew exactly which words to use and which ones to leave out. And she knew that as long as her son was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, she was safe. I had accepted that this was just going to be my life. Uncomfortable holidays, quiet tension, a mother-in-law who would never truly welcome me and a husband who would never truly confront her. I had accepted it. And then one night, everything changed. Not because of something Patricia did, because of something I saw. Something I was never supposed to see. Something that made me realize that the problem in my marriage was never just his mother. It started with a surprise. A small romantic idea I had on a regular Tuesday evening. David had been working late a lot. I missed him. I thought it would be sweet to wait for him in his car with his favorite dinner, some candles, a little note. Something simple. Something that said I still chose him every single day. I thought it would make him happy. I thought it would bring us closer. I never could have prepared myself for what I found instead. I had texted David around 7 that evening. He replied the way he always did when he was busy at work. Short, distracted, a little cold. Still here. Don't wait up. I remember reading that message and feeling something I couldn't quite name. Not anger, not sadness exactly. Just a quiet, tired feeling that had been sitting in my chest for a while and never fully went away. I decided to go anyway. I grabbed the food I had cooked, put it in a bag, wrote a little note on a piece of paper, and drove to his office building downtown. I knew where he parked. He always used the same spot in the garage on the 2nd level, the one near the stairwell because he said it was easier to get out in the morning. I had been there before. I knew the building. I knew the garage. I knew his routine. So I parked my car on the street, walked into the garage, and let myself into the passenger side of his car with my spare key. I put the food on the seat, lit a small candle I had brought in a little glass holder, and I waited. I had my phone with me. I scrolled for a while, checked a few things, smiled to myself thinking about how surprised he was going to be. I imagined his face when he opened the door and saw me sitting there. I imagined him laughing, pulling me close, telling me I was crazy in that warm way he used to. I sat there holding on to that image for almost 40 minutes. And then I heard voices. They were coming from the stairwell just a few feet from the car. I didn't think anything of it at first. It was an office building. People came and went. But then I heard his laugh. I knew that laugh. I had fallen in love with that laugh. It was relaxed in a way he almost never was around me anymore. Easy and open. The kind of laugh that meant he felt completely comfortable with whoever was next to him. I stayed completely still. I heard a woman's voice. She was talking fast. In that breathless way people talk when they've just come down a flight of stairs together, when they're close to each other, when the conversation feels private and a little electric. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. I heard his name said in a way that wasn't professional. I heard him say, "Stop, someone might see us," in a voice that wasn't worried. It was playful. And then I heard nothing for a moment. Just silence. That silence told me everything. I sat in that car and I did not move. I did not breathe too loud. I did not cry. I just sat there with his dinner on the seat next to me and a candle burning in a little glass, and I waited for the sound of the stairwell door to open and close again. When it finally did, I heard his footsteps coming toward the car. Slow, relaxed footsteps. The footsteps of a man who thought he was completely alone. He opened the driver's side door and stopped. He saw me. The look on his face is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was something closer to panic. That split second before a person decides which lie they're going to tell. His eyes went from me to the candle to the food on the seat and back to me. And I watched him calculate. I watched him decide. "Emma," he said, "what are you doing here?" Not, "I'm so glad to see you." Not, "What a surprise." Not even a real question. Just my name, like a problem he had to solve. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I smiled. I reached over, picked up the bag of food, handed it to him calmly and said, "I brought you dinner. You said you were busy. I thought you might be hungry." I blew out the candle. I picked up my purse. I got out of the car without saying another word. He called after me. He said my name twice. By the time he got out of the car to follow me, I was already at the stairwell. I walked to my car on the street, got in, and drove home. My hands did not shake until I pulled into our driveway. And even then, I did not cry. I sat in my own car in my own driveway, and I made a decision. I was not going to react. I was not going to call him screaming. I was not going to send angry messages or pack a bag or do anything that could be used against me later. I was going to be very, very calm, and I was going to pay attention, because I had just learned something important. I had been trusting the wrong person in my own marriage. And before I did anything at all, I needed to know exactly how deep that went. I went inside. I changed my clothes. I made myself a cup of tea. When David came home 40 minutes later with some weak explanation about a coworker he had run into, I listened. I nodded. I told him the food was still warm if he wanted it. He looked at me like he wasn't sure what was happening, like he had expected a fight and couldn't understand why he wasn't getting one. That was exactly what I wanted him to think. The next few days in that house were the strangest days of my life. Not because things were falling apart, but because on the surface, everything looked completely normal. David went to work in the morning. I went to work. We ate dinner together. We watched television. We talked about small things, groceries, weekend plans, a show he wanted to start, and the whole time underneath all of that, I was watching him, not in an obvious way, not in a way he could notice. I was watching the small things, the way he held his phone screen slightly away from me when a message came in, the way he volunteered information about his day a little too quickly, a little too smoothly, like someone who had rehearsed. The way he was suddenly more attentive than he had been in months, complimenting my cooking, asking about my day, reaching for my hand while we watched TV. Men do that sometimes. They get caught, or they get close to getting caught, and suddenly they remember how to be a husband. I let him think it was working. I went back through things quietly, not aggressively, not desperately. I was calm about it the way you get calm when the shock has already passed and what's left is just clarity. I looked at small things here and there, patterns that had been there for a while, that I had explained away because I loved him and because I wanted to believe the best about the man I had chosen. Late nights that happened more and more over the past several months. Weekends where he was distracted and irritable. A business trip in the spring that he had been vague about in a way I hadn't questioned at the time. I had been so focused on surviving his mother that I had stopped paying close enough attention to him. That was my mistake, and I was not going to make it again. About a week after the night in the garage, Patricia called. She called David first, and then when he didn't pick up, she called me, which she almost never did unless she needed something. She wanted to have Sunday dinner at her house, the whole family. She had something she wanted to share, she said. She sounded pleased with herself in that particular way she had, warm on the surface and sharp underneath. I told her we would be there. I wrote it in my calendar. I even planned what I was going to wear, because I had a feeling about that dinner. I couldn't have told you exactly what the feeling was or where it was coming from, but something in me knew that Sunday was going to matter. Some things you just feel before you can explain them. Sunday came. We drove to Patricia's house together, David and I, and the ride was quiet in the way our rides had been quiet lately. Comfortable on the outside, heavy underneath. Her house smelled like it always did, like something rich and slow-cooked, and she greeted us at the door the way she always greeted us, hugging David long and warm and giving me a brief, polite smile that stopped just short of her eyes. His sister was there with her husband, a couple of cousins, an aunt I had met twice before. It was a full table. Patricia liked a full table. We sat down. We ate. The conversation moved the way it always moved at those dinners. Stories about family, updates about people I barely knew, laughter at things I didn't always understand because they were rooted in a history I had not been part of. I smiled when it made sense to smile. I passed dishes. I answered questions when someone asked me one. I was present without being too present. I had gotten very good at that over the years. And then Patricia stood up. She picked up her glass, waited for the table to quiet down, and smiled that smile of hers. The one that meant she was about to say something she had been looking forward to saying for a long time. She looked around the table slowly, building the moment the way she always did because she loved an audience, and then she said that she had some news. Happy news, she called it. News that had been a long time coming. She looked directly at David, and David looked down at his plate. That look, that one small motion. His eyes dropping, his jaw tightening just slightly, his hand going still on the table. I saw it in less than a second, and I understood it completely. Whatever Patricia was about to say, he already knew. He had known before we walked through the door. He had sat in that car with me on the ride over, quiet and heavy, because he already knew what was coming and he had brought me here anyway. Patricia said that David had been seeing someone, that it had been going on for some time, that she had known for a while because the woman was someone she approved of, someone she had actually introduced him to at a family event 2 years before, someone she felt was a better fit. She said all of this like she was giving a toast, like it was good news, like I was not sitting at her table. She said she thought it was time everything came out in the open because she had always believed in honesty and she wanted her son to be truly happy. The table went completely silent. I felt every single eye in that room move to my face. I put my fork down slowly. I picked up my glass. I took one small sip, and then I set it back down and looked at Patricia with the steadiest eyes I have ever had in my life, because I had already known. Not the details, not the name, not the connection to his mother, but I had known. And because I had known and had not reacted, and had spent the past week being very calm and very quiet and very intentional, I was ready. I was more ready than either one of them understood. And that was exactly where I wanted to be. I want to tell you what it feels like to sit at a table where everyone is waiting for you to fall apart. Because there is a specific kind of pressure in that silence. It presses on your chest. It fills the room. It expects something from you. It expects tears or shouting or a chair scraping back dramatically as you stand up and leave. People lean in without leaning in. Their eyes get careful. They are waiting to see what you are made of, whether you know it or not. I did not give them what they were waiting for. I looked at Patricia first. I held her gaze for a long moment without saying anything, without smiling, without frowning, just looking at her the way you look at something you are finally seeing clearly for the first time. And then I looked at David. He had raised his eyes from his plate by then. He was looking at me with something complicated on his face. Part guilt, part relief that it was finally out, part something else I could not fully name. Maybe he thought this was the moment I would break. Maybe he thought that after everything, this would finally be the thing that made me small. I reached into my purse. I took out a folded envelope and I set it on the table in front of him. Flat, calm, no drama. Just an envelope on a white tablecloth. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. "What is this?" he said. "You should open it," I said. My voice was even. It did not shake. I was proud of that voice in that moment. He picked it up slowly. He opened it. Inside were documents. Printed, organized, paper-clipped neatly in the way I do everything when I want to make sure I do not miss a single detail. He went through the first page and his face changed. I watched the color shift in his expression, watched the moment he understood what he was holding. They were financial records, specific ones. Over the past week, while he was performing the role of attentive husband and thinking I was simply moving on from what I had seen in the garage, I had been very busy. I had spoken to a lawyer, a woman I found through a friend of mine, quiet and thorough and very good at her job. I had pulled together everything I needed, our joint accounts, records of transfers I had noticed over the past several months that I had not understood at the time, but understood now perfectly. Money that had moved in ways that did not match the story I had been told. There were other things in that envelope too. Not accusations, documentation. There is a difference. Accusations can be argued with. Documentation just sits there and tells the truth. David set the envelope down. Patricia was still standing at the head of the table. She had not sat back down. I think she had expected this moment to go very differently. I think she had imagined tears, or a scene, or at the very least a long and ugly silence that she could fill with her own voice. She opened her mouth to say something, and I turned to her. I did not raise my voice. I did not lean forward. I simply said, "I am not talking to you right now, Patricia. This is between me and my husband." She closed her mouth. I don't think anyone at that table had ever seen Patricia close her mouth on command before. The aunt looked at her plate. The cousin suddenly needed more water. The sister looked at the wall. The room became very small and very still. I turned back to David. I told him that I had already spoken to a lawyer, that the process had been started, that I was not there to argue or to perform grief for his family's entertainment. I was there because he had brought me there, because his mother had decided that this dinner was the right place to humiliate me one final time, and I wanted them both to understand something clearly. I was not going to disappear quietly. I was not going to be managed or minimized or shuffled out of this marriage with nothing because it was convenient for everyone else. I had spent 3 years being patient and respectful in a family that had never fully extended either of those things to me, and I was done spending energy trying to earn something that was never going to be offered. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I pushed my chair in neatly behind me because I was raised with manners even when the people around me were not. I looked at David one more time and I said, "My lawyer will be in touch. You have everything you need in that envelope." Then I looked at Patricia, just for a second, just long enough to make sure she felt it, and I said, "Thank you for dinner. It was very informative." I walked to the front door. I opened it myself. I stepped out into the evening air and I pulled it shut behind me with a soft, clean click. Not a slam, not a bang, just a door closing the way a door closes when someone is completely done. I sat in my car for a moment before I started it. Not because I was falling apart. I want to be clear about that. I sat there because I wanted to feel the weight of what had just happened fully and honestly before I drove away from it. 3 years. 3 years of holiday dinners and quiet comments and a husband who looked at his hands when he should have been looking at me. 3 years of being patient with a woman who had decided before she met me that I would never be enough. 3 years of loving someone who had taken that love and treated it like something ordinary, something he could set aside when something more convenient came along. I felt the weight of all of it. And then I started the car. I did not look back at the house as I pulled away from the curb. I did not need to. Everything I needed to carry with me I already had. Everything I was leaving behind I had already let go of before I ever walked through that door. That envelope on the table, that was not an ending. That was me finally beginning something. Finally moving in a direction that was mine alone, chosen by me, on my own terms, with my eyes completely open. Some people spend years waiting for the right moment to take their life back. I had waited long enough, and when my moment came, I was ready for it. That is the only thing Patricia ever taught me without meaning to, that you have to be ready. You have to be patient. And when the time comes, you do not hesitate. You simply walk out the door, and you do not look back. The weeks after that dinner were not easy. I want to be honest about that because I think it is important. There is a version of this story where I walk out of that house and everything falls perfectly into place, where I feel strong every single day, where I never sit alone in a quiet room and feel the specific kind of grief that comes from losing something you built with your own hands. That version is not true. The truth is messier and quieter and more human than that. There were nights where I sat on the edge of my bed and went through the whole thing from the beginning, looking for the moments I had missed, the signs I had explained away, the times I had chosen to believe the best about someone who was not giving me his best. Not because I wanted to punish myself, but because I needed to understand. I needed to know myself better coming out of this than I had known myself going in. That felt important. It still does. I moved into an apartment about 3 weeks after that Sunday dinner. A clean, quiet place with good light in the mornings and enough space to breathe. I painted one wall in the living room a deep, warm color that I had always loved and that David had always said was too bold. I bought a plant. I bought 2 more after that. I cooked things I liked, at whatever time I wanted, without thinking about anyone else's schedule or preferences or moods. Small things. But small things add up. And after a while, all those small things started to feel like something larger, like a life that was actually mine. The legal process moved the way legal processes move, which is to say slowly and with a lot of paperwork. But my lawyer was good and thorough, and she made sure that I was protected. The documentation I had put together that night at the dinner table turned out to matter quite a bit. David had been moving money in ways that he had not expected anyone to notice. He had been comfortable. He had assumed that I was too trusting, too focused on keeping the peace, too busy managing his mother to pay attention to the details. He had underestimated me in the same quiet, consistent way that people had been underestimating me my whole life. That was his mistake. And it cost him. Patricia called me once, about a month after everything. I saw her name on my phone and I stood there for a moment just looking at it. Then I let it ring. She did not leave a message. I did not call her back. There was nothing left to say between us. Not because I was angry, but because I was finished. There is a difference between anger and being finished. Anger still wants something from the other person. Being finished means you have stopped wanting anything from them at all. I was finished with Patricia. I wished her no harm. I simply had no more room for her in my life, and I was no longer willing to make room. I think about the woman I was when I first walked into her house all those years ago. Young, eager to be accepted, genuinely trying, bringing flowers on holidays, helping in the kitchen, smiling through comments that were designed to make me feel small. I do not look back at that woman with embarrassment. She was doing what she believed was right. She was trying. There is nothing shameful about trying. The only thing I would tell her, if I could, is this. Pay attention earlier. Trust what you feel in your body when something is not right. Do not spend so long trying to be accepted by people who have already decided not to accept you that you forget to accept yourself. That is the thing nobody tells you about situations like this. The real loss is not the marriage or the house or the years. The real loss is the version of yourself that you shrink down to fit into spaces that were never built for you. Getting that back, finding the full size of yourself again, that takes time. But it is the most important work there is. I am still doing that work. Some days I am better at it than others. But I wake up every morning in my apartment with my plants and my bold-colored wall and my own quiet, and I feel something I had almost forgotten how to feel. I feel like myself. Not a version of myself edited down for someone else's comfort. Just me. Fully. Without apology. If you have ever sat at a table where everyone was waiting for you to fall apart and you chose not to, you know exactly what I am talking about. If you have ever smiled through something that was breaking you because you were not ready to let anyone see the break, you know? If you have ever been underestimated by someone who was supposed to choose you every day and didn't, you know. You are not alone in that. Not even close. And if you are sitting somewhere right now in the middle of your own version of this story, still in the quiet phase, still watching and waiting, still trying to figure out your next move, I want you to know something. Your patience is not weakness. Your silence is not defeat. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait until you are ready. Gather everything you need, and then walk out of that room so calmly that the door doesn't even make a sound when it closes. That is what I did. And I would do it the same way every single time. Leave me a comment and tell me, have you ever been in a room where you had to hold yourself together when everything in you wanted to break? Tell me what you did. Tell me how you got through it. Because this channel is not just about my story, it is about all of ours. And every single one of them deserves to be heard. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. Because there are more stories coming, and every single one of them is about women who chose themselves when no one else did. Hit that subscribe button and come back. We are just getting started.